Welcome to the February 2018 edition of City Connection. It's the live call-in program where you, citizens of Grand Rapids, you can ask your mayor about things that are important to you, things going on here, local issues. I'm Linda Glash in the studio with Mayor Rosalind Bliss today. And we've got a number of things to talk about, including a guest. We have guest Deputy Chief Eric Payne, who will be joining us a little bit later. He'll be a one-on-one with you, and then we'll have a time for questions and opportunities at that point. And then following that, an open question opportunity with anybody on any questions like that. So we're going to give you information in a little while on how you can connect with us through the phone number. It's 459-4881. Email at cityconnection@grcmc.org. Twitter is available too. That is GRTVaccess, and Facebook. Get on GRTV's Facebook page. Mayor, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, in February, things are very, very busy, and I would say maybe one of the primary things on the plate for the city right now is choosing a new city manager with the retirement of Greg Sundstrom.
Yes.
City has taken a little bit of a step back, got down to some finalists through a search firm, and decided want to go a little bit deeper. So talk a little bit about where things stand. A week ago, we had a forum where the community got to meet 3 finalists at that point.
Yeah, and you know, I try not to see it as a step back. We went through a process. We had 3 qualified candidates that met the requirements of the candidate profile and rose to the top out of all the candidates. And you're right, we went through a community process. We had first round interviews, then we had a community forum, we had some stakeholder meetings with the candidates, and then when it came back, then we had second round interviews with the full city commission. And after those, and talking to my colleagues, we couldn't coalesce around one candidate. So the commission was very divided between the candidates, but also really feeling this need to open it back up and reopen the process and see if we could recruit and open up the pool of candidates to take a look at other potential candidates who may be interested in being city manager.
Okay, so in terms of taking a step back, not in terms of going backwards in the process, but more of a wider focus again, and maybe casting a wider net. What was the sentiment of the commission members? What weren't commission members seeing that they were looking for?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for my colleagues. I think that, and I said this on Tuesday night, there were qualities about each candidate that I really liked, but there were also weaknesses, whether that was coming from another city, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So a couple things about the process, and I've had a lot of conversations about the city manager search this past week, as you can imagine. So I try to remind people a couple things. One, we are one of the largest cities that have a city manager form of government. So many mid-sized, larger cities, they have a strong mayor form of government, which is very different than ours. So when you look at other city managers, it's very likely they're going to come from smaller cities. Because when you look at the number of large cities that have city managers, there just aren't very many, especially in the Midwest. And so you always have to keep that in mind. And so it didn't necessarily surprise me that we had candidates from smaller cities, but that really needed to be coupled with extensive experience dealing with more complex community issues. And then one of our candidates had incredible experience, but not experience overseeing public safety, which is, our police department and fire department are our largest departments in the city, really important departments. And then just wrestling with, is the experience that candidate had, can you generalize to overseeing police and fire, and would they have the skills to do that and do that well and hit the ground running, especially when that's such a critical issue in our community. So those were some of the pros and cons that I think all of the commissioners weighed, and just in the end, recognizing the importance of this position. So I also have reminded a lot of people in the community that this is a very critical position in our city. This is the individual, yes, they report to the city commission, but this is the individual that oversees over 1,500 employees, that oversees almost all of our departments, including police and fire and parks and economic development and HR and planning and design team. And so in the end, we need to feel that we have the absolute best candidate to move us forward. The other thing that I think we really weighed heavily was, this individual that we select very likely will be in this position long after I'm gone and many of my colleagues are gone, right? So in the past, we've had a city manager that served 9 years, and then before that, 22 years. No one around the city commission table, we're not going to be here in 9 years because of term limits. And so even thinking through, beyond the current commission, we need to make sure that the city manager that we select is the best city manager for today and 10 years into the future.
So I would think, and I think others might agree, that Grand Rapids is a very desirable place to be.
Yeah.
So do you feel that when you try to reach out and do some recruiting, that it will go through the same process through the hired firm that took it this far? Is the city commission still evaluating how to move forward?
So we're still evaluating that. So we're looking at a number of things. We're looking at how much money we've spent already. We haven't spent as much as we allocated, which is good. But also, doing a recruitment for a position of this caliber, it does cost money. So I also serve on the Transit Authority, and we're in the process right now of doing a search for a CEO. Peter Varga is retiring, and we're spending up to $60,000 for that search. So again, to find the best candidate, you have to spend money to do some of that really important outreach and recruitment. So we're still taking a look at what we did last time, how much we spent, what parts of the process did we think went well, and then what parts do we want to improve. So I have some ideas about that. I think, so for me, I'll speak specifically about my thoughts. In looking at the timeline, I think we need to spread it out more. It felt condensed, and I think initially the thought was these are all individuals that have other full-time jobs, and being mindful of bringing them into town and travel and making sure that there was the opportunity to do that and be sensitive to their availability, but also wanting to make sure that we were able to have time within that. It ended up being just over a week time to get to know them. I think we need to spread that out over more of 2 or 3 weeks even. And so I think we can do some different things with timeline. I think we can open up the posting a little bit longer. So it was opened for 4 weeks, and it was open during the holiday, which in hindsight, that really wasn't the best time. We should have stretched that out a little bit more and had it open a longer period of time. And then also being really thoughtful about, so one of my colleagues on the commission during one of the interviews said, there are cities that have already dealt with a lot of struggles that we are. We're kind of going from a mid-sized city to a larger city. So who are those aspirational cities, and are there individuals within those cities where there's significant talent that we potentially can recruit? And so maybe thinking about that more on the front end, are there individuals in certain other mid-sized cities like Madison or Milwaukee or Chicago or Indianapolis? Because another struggle is there may be a superstar in California or Oregon, but they may not be interested in coming to wintry Grand Rapids. So again, there's different nuances that I think we need to think about. But I am really confident that we can get some great candidates. And I remind people too, it's not unusual for during a search process to open the process back up. In fact, we did it at City Hall for our city attorney. After first round interviews, we opened up the application process again for 2 weeks, wanting to get additional candidates. And that's how we got our current city attorney. She actually applied once the position was opened back up again. We are seeing that right now with the library. So the library board had their first round interviews. They weren't happy with their finalists. They opened it back up. Now they have 4 additional candidates who are really impressive. And so it's not completely uncommon. Of course, do I wish that we were able to coalesce around a candidate? Yes, but only if that was the best candidate for our city. So we really have to keep that at the core of our goal, is to find the absolute best candidate to serve our city at this moment in time. Okay.
One of my takeaways, I was able to attend the forum, and one of my takeaways was feeling very good about Grand Rapids and how it has progressed and its progressive feeling, because a lot of the answers that I was seeing from the candidates, I felt Grand Rapids is already so far beyond that and is advancing to new areas. The idea of looking to cities we admire seems like a great idea. Where are we on the I don't want to say leisure, but the ability to take time with Greg's retirement?
Yeah, so we have an interim. So how the city works, so the city commission, we have 4 appointed officials. Every single one of them have a deputy. In their absence, the deputy moves into an interim. So even right now, we also have our city clerk who just retired.
Right.
So our deputy city clerk moved into the interim city clerk, and she will be in that role until we replace the city clerk. And we have a process that we opened up that we're going through for the replacement of our city clerk right now as well. So our deputy city manager, Eric DeLong, moved into the interim, and he'll be interim city manager until we hire a new city manager. Okay. And so, I wouldn't say, I don't necessarily feel like we want to take a lot of time. We know that this is an important position to fill, and we want to make sure that we move forward on reopening it soon. In fact, Commissioner O'Connor, his motion Tuesday night, when he made the motion to go back out, he was very explicit that he wants it reopened and reposted within 30 days so that we can move forward. Also looking at timeline, there are some opportunities. We have the budget that we're working on right now that will pass in June. Typically mid-June to July is a little bit of a lull and provide some opportunity to build in some good time. And then we also want to be mindful of if somebody is coming from another community and they have children, being able to do that before school starts. And so again, just some things that we should think about when we think about timeline.
Okay, and then a quick follow-up question on that. This is something the city manager would typically do is create the budget.
Yes.
So it may be in the hands of the deputy then.
Yeah, that was actually planned early on as part of the transition. So we spent a lot of time with Greg Sundstrom talking about transition and what he was working on and who would take responsibility for different tasks. And so the deputy city manager back in October started working on the budget and knew that that would be the primary task. Even if we had hired someone and they started in April is what our goal was, we knew that they wouldn't be able to do the budget. So we knew we needed to identify someone to take the lead on that. So that's already taken care of. I see this being a 4 to 5 month, expansion of what we initially had thought.
Okay. Well, it's exciting times here in Grand Rapids for sure. You just gave a quick mention. Not only that is the city clerk's retirement. That's Darlene O'Neill after a number of years.
33.
And that search, oh my goodness. And that search is open as well.
Yeah, so Darlene O'Neill, we had a celebration of her work last week, and had been with the city for 33 years and worked her way up, has been was deputy city clerk and then became our city clerk, and has served our city unbelievably well. I always call her probably one of the most authentic public servants I've ever been able to work with. And it's, like she said this at the commission meeting and then also at her retirement celebration, that, it's just time. She's given 33 years of her life, and she wants to spend time with her family and daughters and travel. And so we wish her well, although I'm sure she'll stay active in some capacity in the community once she takes a little bit of a breather.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, at 15 past the hour, we're going to take a break. Welcome them back when we will have Deputy Chief Eric Payne talking about community and police relations with the mayor. We'll be back after this break.
WYCE is a world of music. We aim to shine a light on underserved musical artists in a non-commercial format with no advertisements. Volunteers come in to create personalized music programming that broadcasts over the air at 88.1 FM to West Michigan and via the internet to listeners all over the world. These listeners sponsor our efforts, keeping WYCE independent and community-owned. Musicians use the station to broaden their audience and build support for their latest projects by submitting their music to be included in our broadcast and performing live in studio. Businesses find their customers through underwriting, nonprofits inform the community to their mission, and listeners stay informed about local events. We believe that music is a powerful force that creates quality relationships in our community, that speaks to our emotions, and provides the soundtrack to our lives.
The Wealthy Theater is Grand Rapids' local movie theater and performance center. Since 1998, it has been a host to nationally touring music groups, local theater performances, and a variety of community events. Today, the Wealthy Theater is not only a landmark community treasure with historic significance, but a pioneer in the infusion of technology and traditional theater. Underneath the elegance and classic sensibility that defines Wealthy Theater, there is a matrix of new technologies. The theater is completely digital and outfitted with cameras and microphones for concerts, theater and comedy troupes, speakers and lecturers, and so much more. Experience all that Wealthy Theater has to offer. And bring a friend. Be surprised by the Wealthy Theater.
All right, welcome back. Today I'm so excited to have with me our Deputy Chief, Eric Payne, who has been with the Grand Rapids Police Department for almost 30 years.
30 years, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So we're just going to talk a little bit about you and your service and some of the things that you're working on, and then
Sure.
also you can give us an update on the work that you're doing, that we're really doing in partnership with the community around improving community and police relations.
Absolutely.
So first, let's talk about you. 30 years.
Yes, 30
Wow.
years. 31 in September.
Wow.
I came to the area, went to school at Grand Valley. After I graduated from there, worked a short time out there, and spent the remaining 30 years here at Grand Rapids. Very happy to be here, and it's been a great adventure.
Yeah. And you've worked your way through the department. I know I've known you in different capacities over the last 13 years, but you want to talk a little bit about your journey and some of the things you've worked on?
Yes, I'll start backward. It's easier to remember, but I spent 3 years as the captain in charge of the investigative unit, which includes detectives and vice. Prior to that, I spent like 11 years as a South Service Area captain, and I was a lieutenant in that area and also the watch commander. I am presently now, as of September, the Deputy Chief of Police in charge of operations for the department, which encompasses like the uniform patrol. Pretty much anyone in uniform, I oversee that.
Yeah. Well, we were happy to see you promoted into that position, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And speaking of detectives, it was probably just a week and a half ago that I was out at the opening of the new Children's Advocacy Center. And I know we have detectives that are based there, but it's if you're not familiar with that organization, it used to be called Children's Assessment Center, and that's where we work in partnership with a multidisciplinary team to respond to incidents of child sexual abuse.
Very important. Chief Haggerty actually started it, so it goes back quite a few years, and we're very fortunate that we've continued. And I have not visited the new location, but I hear it's outstanding and should serve the community very well. But it's very worthwhile for something that's very traumatic as children that are being sexually abused. So it's an attempt to make a very tragic situation or trauma where they received a lot of trauma and try to mitigate that.
Yeah, you know, it's an example of, we were just saying before we went back on air, But there's a lot of things that the department does and a lot of partners we have in the community to work on issues that we really don't talk about enough, that a lot of people in the community don't know about. And sometimes I feel like our work in collaboration with others is one of them. So one of them, obviously, an example is the work we do with the Children's Assessment Center. But our department actually has partnerships with other law enforcement departments and the Sheriff's Department really on a number of issues.
Absolutely. There's a wide range of with federal, state, and local partners. And not to go back to 2008, but there was a huge strain. We had to downsize a great deal. Being partners with those other organizations allows us to continue to provide services to the community. Several of them, the FBI Fugitive Task Force, which allows us to tap into the FBI, U.S. Marshal Service, Joint Terrorism. I mean, I can go on, but there's a lot of good partnerships. And then locally, I mean, we have a financial team that works out of the Wyoming Police Department that we have detectives assigned to. So it's a way of bringing a lot of resources where it's not as much of a drain on our department as a whole together.
Yeah, it's good. And I know recently there was a presentation by a number of the chiefs and the sheriff, even around looking at crisis intervention teams. So some departments in the country, they have built-in crisis intervention teams where they either train law enforcement personnel or actually bring in professionals to work with some more high-risk cases where you're responding, where an individual either has a serious mental illness or a substance use, a significant substance use, and really trying to have a more proactive approach. And so I know there's a lot of talk in our community right now about that as well.
Yeah, the area chiefs, that's a task that they've taken on, and we're working toward getting more officers trained in that area. Mental health is a huge issue that we deal with on a daily basis, and the criminal justice system is not the place for people that are in crisis there. Hopefully we can get them to the resources that they need instead of putting them in the criminal justice system, and we attempt to do that, but further training, identifying different programs we can steer them to, it'll just make us better and make that person better.
Yeah. So one thing about being better, you have been actively involved in a lot of the work around community and police relations, and we're doing a lot in that area. We're doing a lot of great work in trying to enhance our direct contact and work with youth in the community. And then also we're working in partnership with the community, with the task force, with the Police Policy and Procedure Task Force, and that is in partnership with 21st Century Policing. And so do you want to talk a little bit about maybe both of those?
Sure. I need only point to the Boys and Girls Club. Pathways to Policing, that's one program or initiative that's been started with them. And it's to take youth and point them in the direction of law enforcement, kind of your grow your own. And just having that contact with the Boys and Girls Club, that's gone on for years, even longer than I've been here. So, but like the Camp O'Malley during the summertime, I think there was over 500 youths that attended the day-long summer camps. We have our On Base program where we have kids learning baseball, and it's our officers that are working with it. The 21st Century Policing is something that we undertook as part of a recommendation that came out of Traffic Stop Survey, and it was to review our policies and procedures. And we've met with the group, I think, 4 or 5 times now, and March 7th, little plug here, but March 7th we have a community meeting at the Grand Rapids Library from 7 to 8:30, and that's where the public can come and hear about the work that's being done. But essentially we're looking at our more critical policies, and these gentlemen come from all over the country and they're expert subject matters in the field. And I think we do a lot of things well, but it doesn't hurt to have others take a look at it. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
Yeah, and that I think is the balance, is to support the incredible work that we're doing, and also looking at areas that we can improve, and saying we're always committed to improvement, and it's an iterative process, right? I mean, both individually, we all need to be committed to improving individually, but also within the organizations that we serve.
Absolutely. We talked briefly, but we're also undertaking the CALIA process, which is a process that is recognized as a gold standard. And they also come in and review our policies and procedures. So simultaneously, we have two different processes going, although different, where our policies and procedures are being reviewed so that we can have the best practices that are recognized throughout the country in law enforcement.
Yeah, and last year we had a couple incidents with youth,
Yes.
and we took that very seriously and are actually looking at a policy specific to responding when there's a youth involved, but also looking at our own internal training and enhancing that and making sure that we have training maybe you can speak to this, in responding appropriately to youth, especially with use of force.
No, absolutely. And we're looking at both of those areas. The training, which I think we have exceptional training here. I think we recognize, though, the interaction with youth is something that we have not had as much of. So that's being incorporated, or already has been incorporated. We're going through a use of force training right now, where the component of the youth being involved is a part of the training. With the policy, I believe you've seen the draft form. It's not ready to be implemented yet. But another group, if I may mention, a group called Impact, is some high school students. And we had them in, and we actually said, hey, take a look at this. It's in draft form. But they had a couple of recommendations that we're looking at implementing. So not only have you had seasoned law enforcement, the Good Commission look at this, but we also was able to show it to a group of high school students who also gave suggestions on what should be in the policy. So we hope to have that soon for the Commission to review. 21st Century Policing has looked at it. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible, but have a good solid policy that protects not only youth, but also our officers. There are times when force is necessary, unfortunately, with youth. So it's to make sure we have the proper training, proper policies in place to give our officers direction in dealing with it.
Yeah, and that we only have a minute left, but I want to emphasize impact. So if you're not familiar with what that is, that you and Chief Rahinsky are committed to working with and listening to youth. And so Impact is a youth advisory committee. It's a group of young people who meet every single month with the chief. I think you attend those meetings as well.
Deputy Chief Kittle.
And Deputy Chief Kittle, thank you. And you talk about current issues and what you're working on, and you're asking for feedback, and that was started just a couple months ago.
It was, and I mentioned Pathways to Policing. These are students that are looking to go in law enforcement. Chief was very specific about impact. We would not exclude those kids, but he wanted the kids that just wanted to come and talk to police and share. So they may not necessarily want to be in law enforcement or any type of the criminal or part of the criminal justice system, but they also have a lot to offer. So it's a great group of high school students. It's really good to meet with them.
Yeah, it is, and on that we'll finish up. But I have a Mayor's Youth Council, and I meet with them every month, and it's really important to not only talk to them and provide them with information about what you're working on, but to give them a chance to give feedback and to weigh in. And these are our future leaders and our future police officers. And so anyway, so Deputy Chief, we're going to finish up this spot. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll come back for questions and answers.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Sarah Jean Anderson from the Creative Youth Center, and have I got some news for you. We are putting on a story slam at the Pyramid Scheme on Tuesday, March 6th, right here in downtown Grand Rapids, and you are invited. Last year, we asked local writers and storytellers to share their stories on stage in front of a live audience and compete for amazing prizes. It was a huge success, and I have a feeling this one is going to be even better. Fans of the Moth Radio Hour podcast will be familiar with the format. We choose a theme. This year, it's a new chapter, and our storytelling volunteers take the stage and share their tales. All you gotta do is show up, grab a drink, and all of the evening's proceeds go back into the Creative Youth Center's programs. I have the pleasure of hosting Story Slam, and I can guarantee you there will be some hilarious moments that you will not want to miss. At the CYC, we provide after-school creative writing programs and tutoring free of charge to all GRPS students in grades 1 through 12. The Grand Rapids Creative Youth Center prepares kids for life's adventures by supporting their writing and amplifying their voices. And we were able to do all of this thanks to donors and supporters like you. So head on over to our Facebook for ticket information or hit up our website at www.creativeyouthcenter.org to find out how you can be a part of what we do. And I'll see you.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
Welcome back to City Connection live on Community Media Center's GRTV Livewire Channel 24. I'm Linda Galash in studio with Mayor Rosalind Bliss and GRPD Deputy Chief Eric Payne. Welcome to the show, and thanks for some of the information you've already been passing along. We can kick right in with a question because we've got one here, and it's has to do with something you mentioned, having to do with some of the youth interactions with police this past year. So I'll read this email from Josh, and it says, in the past few months, GRPS has had a series of negative, and maybe it's GRPD, has had a series of negative encounters with children in communities of color. We have GRPD officers treating these young people. Why are they treating them so harshly? Your job is to serve and protect, but as a result of these other national incidents, many youth are afraid of officers. How does GRPD hope to create a more positive impact among youth communities of color? And we got started on that a little bit earlier, but want to hear more.
Sure, we did. And those were unfortunate incidents that did occur, but I would dare say we have a lot more interactions that are positive that just don't get the publicity that these two incidents, several incidents, received. But I mentioned earlier the Youth Impact, which was a chief advisory group near high school seniors. There's people of color in that group. We have the On Base program. So it's about us getting out and interacting with youth and hopefully breaking down those barriers of where they feel that they can't interact with us. I do believe we have a lot more positive interactions. They just don't get the publicity that the negative ones do. But we continue every day to work on that. We're looking, in fact, I'm meeting with the prosecutor later in the week about community policing initiatives geared toward the youth in his office. So we're constantly looking for different things to interact with the youth.
Do you feel you're seeing a change or a turn with all these points of contact that are things like Impact and Boys and Girls Club, Kids and Cops programs, and those sorts of things?
The Youth Police Academy, I forgot to mention that. We do that every year. I do. Of course, it's a small percentage of the entire, we're a big city. I mean, mid-sized, big city. We can't reach everyone. continue to talk with Larry Johnson from GRPS, talking about getting more involved in the schools, which we already do, but I think we could do more with that, and he also believes. So continuing to reach out to partners and have that interaction, I think will go a long way in breaking down those barriers.
Okay. You had mentioned earlier when you were talking with the mayor some of the new trainings, or maybe it's not true new, maybe it's more intense trainings with youth, how to handle incidents with youth. Do you feel that the incidents that happened during the last year would happen again with some of the new training that's being taught?
What we're trying to do is raise a level of consciousness with the officers, just like this policy. There are things in this new youth policy interaction that are in other policies, but now we put it into its own separate policy to make officers to understand that youth are youth, and that's how we have to treat them. I can't sit here and guarantee 100% that we won't have a repeat of those incidents. I mean, we talk about several incidents, and they're all unfortunate because we're dealing with youth. The Croc Center incident is one comes to mind from last March. I believe what we're doing now would not change anything with the way our officers handled that situation. And I know there's a lot of debate on whether we did things correctly or not with that incident. Hopefully with the more recent one, the December 6th incident, it'll give officers a better awareness of dealing with youth and how we should interact with them. So hopefully that's our goal, and that's what we do with any policy. We implement the policy, train on it, and hopefully we have good outcomes from it.
Okay. Well, the youth change rapidly, and the type of youth that we deal with now versus 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it's just a whole different world. Is the training ongoing? Is it evolving to take on changes?
It definitely is. One of the systems we have, a part of our training is called the Milo system. It's interaction decision making on police officers. And just to understand it, basically you're confronted with a screen and you interact with that screen and scenarios that come up. That's one part of where we're going to integrate youth into that training where it has not been before. I don't know of any other agency that's ever done this with this system. So again, we're kind of on the cutting edge, and we always look to make sure our training's up to date, and again, cutting edge, and hopefully that will help prepare our officers in dealing with the public.
You've mentioned probably half a dozen different programs where the police and youth connect. How many youth do you think you are connecting directly with, even beyond community policing?
Well, again, I think community policing is where we get our most bang for our buck, because we always have police officers out there. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal program, but just the interaction with youth. I see it every day or read about it in our logs. And officers interacting with youth. So to put a number on it, I can't really put a solid number on it, but it's our goal that every day our officers, whether they're community police specialists or just our normal beat officers, they're interacting with that youth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have to add to that too. Being out in the community, I can't think of many community events I've gone to where there's not someone from the police department. So we have the neighborhood night outs, and we have neighborhood breakfasts, and we have community gatherings, and very, very often GRPD is present and interacting with families and with children. And that, that is, that kind of organic relationship is important, but I do think that the work that the department is doing with young people at Camp O'Malley is really amazing. I've worked with kids in my former job at St. John's Home. I've worked with kids who participated in On Base. So On Base is where the police officers work with kids in the neighborhood, and they do baseball through the summer. And I actually had at least a half a dozen kids from St. John's who participated, and I've had kids participate at the Boys and Girls Club and go out to camp, and it really is a life-changing experience when you have time to build that relationship. And that's really key, right? The heart of the solution here is building relationships and building trust. Knowing that no one's perfect, incidents may happen, But when you have the faith and the trust and the commitment to come together and do what is best for our community, I think that's really what drives this desire to do the best that we can do and to improve.
Absolutely.
So when there are those authentic and genuine connections starting to happen more and more, the recruiting process for police was even tough for the city before because there wasn't that opportunity for people coming up through the system and looking through from youth on and good connections like that. So this sounds like a recruiting tool all the way around too.
Oh, absolutely. Grow our own. That's what we look to do. There's nothing better than getting a local person from Grand Rapids that want to serve the community. And these are opportunities, the on-base, the exposure to police officers. As I mentioned, the Youth Police Academy, Impact. These are kids that normally are not looking to be in law enforcement. Maybe it'll change their mind. We have an intern program. I forgot to mention them. And I'll be very neglectful. Deputy Chief Kittle would be upset, but we've also started the Community Engagement Unit. And that's a group that all they're doing is looking to engage in the community. And that goes all the way from recruiting to hiring, background investigators. So we're tackling this on several different levels, and like I said, the community engagement unit, it's only a couple of months old, but they're still working toward it.
Well, and I'll add with the hiring piece, and Deputy Chief, you didn't mention this, but I really applaud the chief and the department for looking at how do we recruit differently, how do we hire differently. And so something that was changed last year in a new program was this whole recruit process, where we found that a barrier to becoming a police officer is if you don't have the resources to go to the academy and to afford to meet all the requirements. And so being able to hire someone on the front end, help pay for them to go through the academy, and then them having a job on the back end. And so we had a recruit class, just the most recent recruit class, again, was one of the more diverse recruit classes that we've ever had and that we've ever been able to hire. And that, I don't know if you want to speak to the success of that program, but.
It is. I mean, it was very diverse, but I think they were the best candidates also out of that pool, and that's what we have to look for anytime we hire. But again, yeah, Barry, you're right. We thank the city for allowing us to do it, but we were able to hire police or cadet or recruits, send them through the academy, and then come back and there was no guarantees they were going to work here at Grand Rapids, but they all did. This is where they wanted to be at, and they just started patrol a couple of weeks ago that we were able to get them in, and we're looking to do that process this year and maybe in some other forms a couple other times this year. So getting that diverse pool of candidates is very important for us, and that's one way of doing it.
And the big part of that, which I appreciate, is exactly what you said. We want the best candidates, but we also want to look to see if there are barriers to opportunity. Sure. And then how do we look at our system and say, let's remove these barriers to create greater opportunity. And then if a young person grew up here, is from Grand Rapids, they really want to be a police officer, but they don't have the resources, how do we assist, come alongside, and make that opportunity available?
Yes.
What are some of the barriers beyond the cost that the city's been able to identify and remove?
We're competing with private sector.
Okay.
One of the things that we look at when it goes to diversity, it's very competitive to be a police officer. I mean, we have at least one that's an attorney. We have a lot of master's degrees, bachelor's degrees. So it takes a lot of schooling now to get in to be a qualified, and that's throughout the country. With that said, we're competing with the private sector, and when it comes to diversity, they're out recruiting those same individuals to be in their firms or like teachers. So that's one of the barriers we have to break down. I mean, police work can be dangerous. It could be, weekends, holidays. So competing with that private sector is one barrier we have to look at.
Okay. Deputy Chief Eric Payne, thanks for joining us today. Lots of great information, revealing a lot about some of the new programs. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We're going to take another break here on City Connection and be back in just a few minutes.
I'm Kiran Sooth Patel, Managing Editor for The Rapidian. The Rapidian is a proud service of Grand Rapids Community Media Center. Join us for our first community journalism workshop of the year. The session will be held on Tuesday, February 20th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. at the Grand Rapids Public Library main branch. During this session, we will share information about the Rapidian, the basics of community journalism, and how to get started writing an article. This is the perfect opportunity if you've been wanting to learn more about the platform and where to start when it comes to writing an article. We will also go through a writing exercise to get your creative energy flowing as you begin the process. Bring your ideas and questions to the session. Registration is now open on our Facebook page. Lunch and supplies will be provided. To learn more about the Rapidian, visit us online at therapidian.org or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope to see you there.
How do you build a strong local food economy? Meet Chris. Chris is opening Osteria Rosa, a locally sourced Italian restaurant in a building brought back to life by 616 Development. But he doesn't know any local farmers to supply him with food year-round. This is Melissa. Melissa runs the Fulton Street Farmers Market and publishes a long list, even in the dead of winter, of available produce, meats, bakery goods, and more on the Rapidian. This is Amy. Amy wants to do more to support the farmers in her local food economy. Amy talks to Melissa, who introduces her to farmers at the Fulton Street Farmers Market, and Amy, in turn, publishes their stories, also on the Rapidian. Chris hears about the Rapidian and now has access to a local grocery list and information that he needs to make connections with local farmers. He feeds his patrons with local food year-round. Connections multiply, meals are shared, a stronger local food economy is built.
Welcome back to GRTV Community Media Center's live on Live Wire. We're at City Connection here with Mayor live in the studio. It's actually the portion of the show where Mayor takes on some of the questions, and Rosalind Bliss is here to take your questions. We have the phone number at 459-4881. GRTV's Facebook page is another option, and Twitter at GRTVaccess. But in the meantime, I have a few questions.
All right, let's hear them.
Let's do it. I saw notice that drivers are now required to stop when they see a pedestrian at a crosswalk. Yes. And I wanted you to tell us a little bit about what led to that and a little bit about how it works and the penalty and how you handle that.
Yeah, so one of our goals and initiatives is to get to 0 pedestrian crashes, injuries, deaths. So we want to be a safe place for pedestrians. We want to be a walkable, safe city everywhere, downtown, neighborhoods, everywhere. So we're looking at our ordinances, and we're looking at the language in our ordinances, and we're looking at ways that we can strengthen those. So one of them was in the past at crosswalks, it was to yield, and so we changed that to stop. So now you have to stop if you see people in a crosswalk, not just the crosswalks where you have the big blinking lights, but every crosswalk. And so that strengthens that ordinance. But really we want people to be more aware of pedestrians and recognize that they have the right of way. And so this is one of those efforts. And it's coupled with a number of other things we're doing around education. We're also looking at the pedestrian crosswalks themselves. We're looking at some that are in areas that may need additional signage and lighting, or you may have seen, we've done quite a bit of testing this past year. So even on Wealthy Street, we added some yellow markers in the middle of the road that remind people that it's a crosswalk. So we're trying different techniques to increase safety. We did this over by Mary Free Bed. We added at a crosswalk blinking lights that if you hit a button, it'll blink to give drivers warning to slow down, that there's a person getting ready to stop, or I mean to cross, so that they have time to stop. So we're looking at multiple ways that we can put in some infrastructure to also help with this.
So with this new ordinance, is there signage now that says so? Because let's say I saw a press release, but
Yes.
People coming into town for the night. I happened to observe this weekend it was a busy night in town, and we had a lot of events, including WIC's Jammies and other concerts, and kind of seeing people tentative. Do they step into the crosswalk first? If you see them at the edge of the sidewalk, how does it work?
Yeah. So some of the signage, the crosswalks that have signage, we will be converting those. So we'll be doing that probably over the next couple months. But then also, a piece of it really is that educational piece, and we need to do a lot of that. We started that actually last year. We did a whole education campaign actually about cycling, and then we did education campaign around pedestrian safety, so we'll continue that work.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's some good information, and again, making the city more friendly for pedestrians as well as cyclists. Right, another question is, and this is something you and I were talking about before we went on air, but the city's new website, talking about the education aspect, this is yet another place where people could learn more about it.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up. So the website, I feel like we have been working on this website redesign for about a year and a half.
It was a priority that you mentioned when you became mayor.
It has been a priority of mine for a number of reasons. One is our old website was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. And it was extremely difficult to find information. When you did find information, it was a PDF. It was extremely difficult to even get information and education out there. And as being a city commissioner for 10 years, so often residents would call me, and I would have trouble finding the information on the website. And so my fundamental belief is that government is here to make your lives easier, right? That government should be all about what can we do to make you want to love living in your city, but also make your lives easier as residents, as businesses. And we also want an engaged community. Well, you can't be engaged if you don't have access to current information. And that's another thing I had heard as a commissioner, is that people would find out about something after the fact. Even though it was available electronically, they couldn't find it. It wasn't easily accessible. I heard this with payments, right? People who struggled and then would be stuck with late fees. So anyway, the updating of the website to me was more than just about creating a better looking website. It was truly about it being driven by the community and becoming a place where people could find information, engage with the community, and feel empowered to do that. And so we went through a good year and a half long process. We worked with a company called Open Cities, and the entire process was customer driven. It was driven by residents. So from the very front end, we started identifying users in the community to work with us, and really in partnership with us, to help not just design the website, design the information, but also as the website was being built through the iterative process, individuals in the community were with us along, and they were giving us immediate feedback on what needed to be improved. And so it's truly, I hope you go to the website. There's a spot for residents and businesses. There's an open data portal. So again, that's been another big push of mine, is to have open data that people have access to. So about a year ago, we passed an open data policy at the city. And so all of that is on the website. There's still obviously more work to do, because you have to constantly be updating content. But it's a much more user-friendly, but also resident-informed and driven website.
One of the features that you'd mentioned the last time you were on the show, I think, was taking payments online.
Yes.
And that's just one, pretty much a small feature, but what are some of the other elements that have really enhanced the site?
Yeah, so you can do pretty much everything on site. So the intent of the website was to become truly a digital city hall, that you should be able to, from both your desktop, your laptop, or your smartphone. So that was another priority, is we know that 60% of users they connect with the city through their smartphone. And so we wanted you to be able to do everything from your handheld device. But you'll be able to go on to the website and fill out applications. So let's say you're a small business owner and you want to open a business, or you need a license, you can do all of that online. You can submit your permit request online. If you want to apply to serve on a board or commission, you can do that electronically now. So when I first became mayor, you had to go print off a PDF, hand fill it out, mail it in, or drop it off at the clerk. You don't have to do that anymore. It's really a couple clicks of the mouse to fill out the information and submit it. And that was another thing. We wanted to take all of that documentation and make it very easy to complete and to submit electronically.
Website is?
www.grcity.us.
Okay. And then you mentioned it being a data-driven site, or that being a large element of it. That feeds nicely into a question I wanted to ask you about what City Works. That's something that the city was just awarded, and what that means has to do with data-driven decisions and assessments.
It is. So What Works Cities is a program funded through Bloomberg Philanthropies. And Bloomberg Philanthropy, several years ago, they opened up this program to work with 50 large cities with the intent of how do we use resources and best practices to help cities become a data-driven city. So how do you use data because like any public entity, we have a lot of data, but how do you actually use that data to make better decisions, right? And there's lots of examples of that, and I'll give you an example, like a concrete example. So anyway, What Works Cities opened up their application for an additional 50 cities and said we'll work with a total of 100 and we'll open it up to mid-sized cities. So we applied to become a What Works City about just over a year ago now, and then went through an assessment process and an interview. There was actually a team from What Works that came to the city and met with us and did a site visit. And then just a couple weeks ago, we were informed that we were selected. And so what that means is that it's a grant that includes, it's a 3-year process where What Works will send in a team of experts, data analysts, innovation officers to work with the city and city staff to look at our data and really pare it down to figure out what are the key data points that will help us drive improvement to services. So this is an opportunity to use data for constant quality improvement to improve the services that we offer to the community. So it's very exciting. It's a competitive process. We're the only city in the state of Michigan that was selected, and we'll join this cohort of other cities, and we'll be able to learn from other cities that are years ahead of us when it comes to being a data-driven city. They'll help us create a dashboard that the community can interact with to be able to see in real time where we are with meeting our metrics and our goals. And so it's a very exciting opportunity for us.
Very interesting, very exciting. So they've already come on site, they've already spent some time with city staffers, but when does the program kick off in full force?
Soon. So we were just given the announcement a couple weeks ago, and then they'll be back here, I believe actually next month. And then they'll identify the team that will work with us. And the great thing is that they will build capacity within the organization so that when they leave, it'll be a part of how we work.
So it's dynamic and new data coming in all the time.
It is. And so if you go to the website, you can see an open data portal. And through our work with What Works, you'll see that portal become much more robust.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, that closes out the February edition of City Connection. Mayor Rosalind Bliss, thanks for joining us again. We'll be back the first Monday of March, typically, unless you have any schedule conflicts, and we'll adjust. I'm Linda Galash, closing things out for City Connection here on GRTV's Live Wire Channel 24.